Andy Way, welcome to the Dad Edge podcast, my friend. I'm excited to have you here. The Art of Living Adventurously. Oh, I love the title of your brand, man.
Hey, thanks a lot. Honored to be here.
Yeah, I'm honored. Well, yeah, I always like to start with just the your origin story and how you grew up. So why don't we start there? I'd love to know, obviously, the how you grew up and even the connection you had with your own dad, some things you learned from him, and just tell us a story about your origin.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. A lot of people, I'm not originally from St. Louis. I do live in St. Louis, Missouri today, but I'm originally from a small little island called Isle of Hope in Savannah, Georgia. It's on the Intercoastal Waterway, and my typical response to, where are you from or where did you go to high school is, I grew up like Huck Finn with a motor down on the Intercoastal and had a little boat from the time I was 13 and was raised. I'm one of six and had a great mom and dad.
That's right. So you live next to Savannah?
Yeah, in Savannah, one of the islands there. Yeah, a little
Okay.
island of about 2,000 people. There's not a grocery store or a gas station or a stoplight or any of that.
So, I had an experience in Savannah, and since you kind of grew up there, I've heard that Savannah is actually one of the most haunted places in the country. Is that true?
Yeah, that's my
Okay.
understanding.
So kind of crazy thing, man. Like, so when my wife and I went there before my second son was born, it was like kind of like a last hurrah trip before my second son was born. My wife was really pregnant at the time, and we stumbled upon Savannah by accident because we were actually staying in Hilton Head, and I I actually found out why the resort that we stayed at was so cheap in September. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a great deal, right? Well, it's hurricane season. Like, didn't know that, 15 years ago. And so we went to Hilton Head. The first 2 days, 3 days were great. Then the last 2 days, it was miserable. Like it was like a monsoon that just never stopped.
Yeah.
And so we were just like, well, what do we do? We got to make the best of this. So we actually just drove to Savannah and we literally walked around town and we sight saw and we went on ghost tours and people, we knew nothing about it back then. And people were telling us, they're like, oh yeah, it's one of the most haunted places in the country. And we're like, really? And they're like, yeah, yeah, there's paranormal activity all the time. And the locals there were just so used to it. They're like, yeah, it's just part of our life, like no big deal. And then kind of the crazy thing though, no kidding around, my wife, I still have this in my iPhone. I saved it one of my favorites because I love showing it. We went to the Sorrel Weed House. Are you familiar with the Sorrel Weed House?
No, no,
So
not.
Sorrel, yeah, so it's somebody's last name. I think it's Sorrel and Weed, and it's been on Travel Channel, one of those haunted houses in the entire country, yada yada yada. And they took us on a tour, like us in a group, and they were just like, yeah, and they took us in all these rooms and that kind of thing. They're like, take your photos, take cameras out and just take photos everywhere. It's just like chances are your camera will pick up on either an orb or an apparition. And don't be surprised if you probably see a woman apparition in your photos. You can't really see her with the naked eye, but you can see her in the photos. And at the time, this was before smartphones. So the reason I have a copy of it in my iPhone is because I downloaded it, but I had one of those Sony digital ones, and I'm just like snapping pictures all over this room. And so we're going through all the photos as we leave. And sure enough, man, like my wife and I, we were in the dining room, and outside of the window into the backyard, you see this half torso apparition of this woman. And we asked the bus driver, like, oh my God, like, is this her? And they're like, oh yeah, that's her. And we're like, what's the story? Well, turns out the what happened is this house was in the plantation days. And the man who owned it, that was his wife. And what happened was is she had an affair with one of the slaves.
Hmm.
And the guy ended up killing the slave that she an affair with, and she was in love with him. So she committed suicide. She threw herself off the balcony and killed herself. And they're like, oh yeah, she walks around all the time, makes noises. This it like literally just no other thing. But did you ever experience any of that kind of stuff growing up?
Not exactly to that degree. I grew up in, a slave. It was a slave hospital for yellow fever during the Civil War. And my sister and I both swear of an occurrence that we had one night. So yeah, it's not uncommon to hear stories, and there may or may not have been a ghost in the house I grew up in.
Wow. So to the locals, it's just like it's just part of how we live, right?
Yeah, I don't think that they're just kind of walking around tapping you on the shoulder and freaking you out. But but yeah, it's probably a little bit more common down there of a conversation than it is around here. And people love their kind of folklore and their stories down there for sure. So some may or may not be embellished.
Interesting. So also tell us how tell us about the relationship you had with your own dad and just maybe some life lessons you learned from him.
Yeah. My dad had two kids before he was 20. He was a single father. I was raised by predominantly by my stepmom. And my dad, yeah, he owned his first restaurant before he was 25, and went on to open a string of franchises and be kind of a big fish in a small pond. But one of the things I remember most is that he never missed a game of mine. He never missed a practice. He was always just kind of a good role model for me. He's heavily involved with his church and in the community. Um, you know, Bible studies and so forth. I don't know. He's just a great role model for me, and was always, teaching me lessons about being a leader and character. And he definitely modeled all of these things and modeled grit. Um, and so for the longest time, he kind of had a cape until I was well into my teens. So we were close. Um, yeah, love my dad.
And is your dad still alive today?
He is. He is. He's out in Tucson, Arizona, and kind of traded the suits for, a cowboy hat. And yeah, he's retired now, but yeah, he's been out in Tucson, Arizona for a long time.
Wow. Very cool.
Yeah.
Uh, and do you guys still talk quite a bit?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're close, and I try to call all of my family, and it's a big, sprawling family. We're all over the country, so that's one of the things that I kind of adopt as the oldest male in the family, and it's I call everybody and check on everybody pretty regularly. So, just to maintain the relationship between us all because we are kind of spread out. So yeah, we talk quite a bit.
That's really cool, man. And then tell me what your family looks like now.
It's complex, to be honest. So I was not raised with my mom. So my biological mom and stepdad are in Austin, Texas, and I talk to them quite a bit. Sometimes as frequently as 2 and 3 and 4 times a week, I'll talk to my mom. My dad and stepmom and adopted younger brothers and brother are in Tucson, and then my mom who raised me, my mom and stepdad and brother and sister-in-law are in Savannah, and another sister in Williamsburg, Virginia, and brother-in-law. So we're kind of all over, and another sister in Atlanta and brother-in-law there.
You guys are like all over the place.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Tucson, Austin, yeah, multiple in Georgia and Virginia and here. So, yeah.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's really spread out. Yeah, I want to get to obviously your son. And obviously this is a dad show. And first of all, I just want to the audience hasn't they don't know about your story just yet, right? But I do. And first of all, I just want to honor you for coming on here and just sharing this story with us because my gosh, I'll share this with you. Um, so my best friend and my business partner, Jason McKenzie, recently tragically just lost his 19-year-old daughter as you and I are speaking 2 weeks ago in a horrible car accident.
Hmm.
Literally at dinner with my wife a couple weeks ago, got a text from Jason. My beautiful, my beautiful daughter Chloe was just killed in a head-on collision, and I was just like, and I've known him now since 2015, and you know, I've been helping Jason through a lot of these things, right? And Jason's been doing this dad work with me for so long, and and I've known him so well, and I think your story, my story, his story of sometimes you're just put up against things and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is way harder than I thought. Number one. Number two, where's the manual when it comes to this kind of thing? Who can I get some help from? Can I do more? Should I do more? I'm not really sure. All these questions that we ask ourselves that quite frankly, we just don't have the answers to sometimes. But to be honest, I just want to give you full reign to start this story and just share it however you see fit.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate that, Larry. I mean, it's a story that my wife and son and I openly share, but it does hit a nerve. I think that for the most part, I typically have to tether the story because many just can't handle the weight of it. And I'd rather them be able to hear the lessons learned and the story of hope and healing and transformation more so than just kind of the pain of the experience. So we're happy to share it, and I hope that the listeners can hear it and take something of value away from the conversation.
Awesome. So where would you like to start with this?
I think that we can start with, there was a time when my dad's cape came off, right? Um, he loved being a dad. He loved all of we kids, all the siblings. But there's a time, it doesn't matter how much you plan, prepare, how many books you read. Sometimes just life doesn't always turn out the way we think it will, and it's our ability to adjust that makes all the difference. Um, and I think that as a parent, it can begin there with just acknowledging the fact that life is, at 47, the world doesn't look like the world I grew up in. And it's not the same for our kids today either. And so that's we can start there. It's just acknowledging that it's a different world today, and it's tough.
Yeah. So, yeah, gosh, you and I are the same age. My wife and I were just talking about this, about how the world isn't how you and I grew up. Like, so for instance, just something that's kind of small and minute, but also very serious is that I remember growing up and I remember fearing my teachers.
Mm.
I remember being disciplined, by my teachers, right? And even fearing my parents and stuff like that. And what I've noticed with this generation is they are, a lot of them are full of fear and really, really fluffy, but they're also fearless and they don't care about consequences and things don't scare them. And I think this is just my theory. I don't know if it's right or not, but I really think they're desensitized through what they're seeing on social media. And I would even risk to say it's TikTok, because they're mindlessly scrolling through these videos, right? Of like all this crazy stuff that they see and they just sort of get used to it. My two older boys go to high school, and they came home and they were just like, a fight happened today at high school. I was like, oh yeah, well, who was in it? And they're like, the principal. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah. I was like, what happened? They're like, the principal was verbally disciplining a student, and the student punched him. And the principal is ex-military, and this principal took this kid down, like just grabbed it. I mean, it was self-defense, and the principal did not get in trouble because it was all caught on video. And so like this principal gets a shot to the face and then immediately just grabs the kid and takes him to the ground and basically just restrains him, right? Doesn't hurt him or anything like that, but restrains him so he doesn't continue to hurt him. And I told my kids, I was like, this blows my mind, man. I was like, this was not an issue when I went to high school. I was like, if you did that, like, I went to an all boys Catholic prep. I went to DeSmet. So like, you did that to one of the Jesuits, they would hit you. And there was no recourse. Like, you come home and be like, teacher hit me. My mom would be like, what'd you do? Like, there was none of this like lawsuits and all this other crazy stuff going on. So I asked my son, and I was like, why do people feel like, why does this happen? And they're like, well, a lot of people view it as entertainment. And then I was like, what do you mean? I was like, when we see our teachers like get heated and yell and scream, or like they get upset, like everybody laughs. And I was like, are you kidding me? And like, yeah, like it's just entertainment. And I'm like, that is crazy to me, because like we actually had fear kind of growing up, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean there's so much in there that we could unpack, but definitely a different world today, and whether it's and I don't know, I could never point to one thing. I think that it's just so much going on and so much changing all at once that just I think just being aware of that alone, um, we don't have it all figured out. We don't know all of the answers, but we do. It's helpful to seek good counsel, identify what that is, and who around you is a good guide that you trust. What elders are a good guide that you trust. And then, of course, those guiding principles and values, because without some sort of North Star, yeah, we as parents can lose our way. I think sometimes we get distracted and overwhelmed, and everybody's so busy. And then also, of course, the kids can too. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot that we can unpack there for sure, but it's definitely a different world.
Well, I'd really love to start with your story. You have a son, he's 20 years old now.
Yeah.
And during his teenage years, I have two teenagers. A lot of the guys who listen to the show, they have teenagers. So this raising teens is not easy. And in your particular situation, you were dealing with some self-harm, you were dealing with substance abuse, and eating disorder, some anxiety and depression. And that is challenging for any dad. And I know we even have some moms who listen to the podcast. So if you're even a mom, I mean, this is not just obviously hard for dads, this is hard for moms as well. But what were the breadcrumbs that were being left behind that you knew there might be an issue? Like when it first started?
Well, this started. I was a single father for 7 years, right? So I found myself here in St. Louis with a 1.5-year old, and then in sixth grade, and Drew's a happy, he's a happy, healthy, gregarious young boy, and he played sports, was smart, and but in sixth grade, things started to change, and his mother and I were not on the same page, which is one of those powerful lessons, how critical it is to be on the same page if you're in a co-parenting relationship. You definitely need both parents. But some of those crumbs were, schoolwork. Um, and then there are some other, it's terrible, but cutting was a nasty thing. And so how that was revealed was an unpleasant discovery. I had never known anything about that world of the emotional, that kind of emotional escape or outlet, that coping mechanism in cutting. Um, and then bulimia. Of course, we sought to get as much help as we could, and it just continued to evolve. But the cutting was the first to rear its ugly head.
And do you know any of the psychology behind this? Because I don't. I don't know any of the psychology behind cutting. I mean, we've had a couple of guests come on and talk about teenage girls and eating disorders, so we know a little bit about that. But the cutting thing, I don't think we've ever talked about. Do you know any
Yeah,
reasons why
it's
people do that?
yeah, I don't know everything about it, but through our experience, my understanding is to feel. They feel numb. They are in a lot of pain emotionally that they're burying inside. So the only way that that's how they emotionally cope is to feel pain again, and that they can control, um, and at least feel. And that's pretty sad. So that's what I know of it.
And so the breadcrumbs of him cutting, did you just start to notice these things like on his arms, like maybe just
It
yeah, so
was it was like a disposable razor that had been kind of broken apart in the trash can, and then a drop of blood in the bathroom. Spending more and more time kind of in the bathroom, um, and then yeah, it was really predominantly used disposable razors.
so when you knew that this was starting to happen or you had some breadcrumbs that you thought it might be happening, how did you I can only imagine trying to prepare for that type of conversation of what was going through your mind. What was going through your mind?
Just sadness. And you want to protect and you want to understand. That is not. I had read all of the books. I was really excited to be a father. Um, Drew is the world to me, and is. Um, and so it kind of boggles the mind to say the least. What is this? What's happening? Again, not anything I'd ever heard about, known about, had any exposure to. So that was a real curveball. And so, how do you adjust to try to help your son in that scenario other than just go get professional help as quickly as possible? And so that's exactly what we did. And of course, started to read what I could on it.
Right. So, how did he receive just the initial conversation?
He was pensive at first, right? He didn't want to. He was embarrassed. He didn't want to just openly show his arms, but then you see an arm, and it did get progressively worse. But and then this led to an evolving um, kind of not recipe, but a menu of issues that took place over the 6 years. But he was hesitant at first, but I think that he and I have trust, and so we tried to get him some help, and so we set up appointments with a therapist, and then you try to find the therapist that's the right fit, and that's a whole challenge. So
I can only imagine. Um, and then the eating disorder, was that something that happened later on? Was it the same time?
it was probably that year, later that year. Drew carried a little weight, although very athletic. Um, he was bullied pretty badly for just being a heavier set kid. And not that he wasn't athletic and fast and strong, he just carried some weight for a young boy. And so I think he just developed this real insecurity about his physique as a young boy, just from all of the bullying. So so that started to transpire.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because I think most of us think that, that's only isolated to our daughters. But, if a kid is struggling with his weight in any way, shape, or form, and he's targeted as being bullied, and I would even call it tortured, mentally and
Yeah.
emotionally and sometimes physically. The weight really plays a huge aspect in that. I was myself, I was overweight growing up. I was made fun of a lot, a lot. And I would say that this sounds kind of crazy to admit because I'm 47 years old, and there probably isn't many days I miss going to the gym. Like, I pride myself on physically being active and fit and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, I would honestly say, again, as hard as it is to admit this, I stay that way because there's two different types of motivation, right? There's the motivation of like, I want to operate in a certain way, be a certain way, and celebrate what my body can do. And then there's also like, I want to prevent, being overweight because I remember what that was like growing up. And I would say probably 70% of my motivation is I don't want to be heavy again. I don't want that feeling. I don't want that lack of confidence. I don't want somebody to say something.
Yeah.
It's just it hurts. I think, and that hurt kind of never goes away. And no matter my wife my wife kind of jokes with me that if she catches me in the pantry, and she does this in a very loving way, and I'm grabbing like some chocolate like late at night or something like that, she's like, "Oh," she's like, "Is that little fat Larry coming out again?" Like, if she does it, we smile, we like laugh about it, but I was like, "Yep, that's exactly what's going on right now." But that's a tough one. What advice would you have for men if, let's just say, a man is listening to this and he's thinking that maybe his son or daughter might have an eating disorder, but he's not sure. He doesn't maybe even know how to talk about it. What type of breadcrumbs did you see early on that you started thinking like, wait, there might be more of the story here?
I mean, if I think about it, again, so much there. Just because it didn't happen to me when I was young doesn't mean that it's not real for Drew, right? And so I think as a lot of times as a father, it's kind of we always we want to fix the problem, we want to help, we love our kids, but all we have to really go on is the modeling we receive and our just own experience. And I think it is really important. I would have never thought, bulimia, what? Um, and he wasn't a real heavy kid. He just carried a little bit of weight. He was just he was 12. Give him a minute. And but I think it's important to if you notice something's off with your son or daughter, something's off. And it's really important to pause, take heed, and listen to the words, beat the words or the silence, because there's something there. And just because it didn't happen to you doesn't mean it's not true for them. And that's a real big um, lesson learned for sure. Because there was a lot that was revealed that I had never experienced, nothing I had ever read about in the books on fatherhood and raising boys in America today. This was a whole new situation.
Yeah, I think we probably identify someone who might have a quote unquote like they're overweight, right? It's not necessarily, you know, that maybe you look at somebody aesthetically and they're like, oh, that person's overweight. It's the experience of being bullied because of that. Whether you're 5 pounds, quote unquote, people think you're 5 pounds overweight or 50 pounds overweight. It's the experience of being tortured as a kid, by your peers or by kids who are older than you. That's the experience that really, I think, shines a light on that for kids. You have this, so you have this mission, right? Which is the art of living adventurously. And I just want to take a moment here and really honor you for what you're doing, because I think when men are challenged, our parents are challenged, right? We think of we have some really really fantastic friends, who they're raising a boy who has some special needs, and they're very challenging. We have another couple that, they're here in St. Louis, actually, that we hang out with, we work out with, and their daughter has a rare genetic, um, disorder. Only 19 people in the entire world have this, and she can't walk, she can't talk, she can't necessarily even breathe on her own. She can sort of interact with you and that kind of thing, but they are challenged all the time. This poor child and this poor family, she's almost died, I think 6 or 7 times. It's their entire life, revolves around taking care of her. And they, I gotta tell you, they are the most positive, most faith-based people I've ever met. And they're so just motivated to create the best life possible for this little girl. Now, on the flip side, we see people that have gone through challenges like this, like you have, or like they have. And if they want to kind of check out and be like, I don't know what to do, I don't really, I'm just kind of clueless. Society, I think, in a way, kind of gives those people a pass of like, well, yeah, of course you don't. Like, yeah, I wouldn't blame you. It's kind of hard not to take action or not know what to do and just be paralyzed, not do anything. But then there are people that do things differently. And I would definitely say you're one of them, right? Where you're like, no, I'm going to do things differently the best way I know how. So I'd really love to know, how did this mission of the art of living adventurously, how did this happen?
It happened because I was a crust father. Um, I was toast. There was just nothing left in me. I had poured everything, um, and this was we're 3 years into this at this point, and I couldn't save my son. It didn't matter how much I loved him. It didn't matter how many books I'd read. It didn't matter how much I prayed. It didn't matter. I couldn't help him, and to watch him suffer, um, to the degree that he was suffering, was just devastating for me. And so, and that's just the truth. I was toast. I mean, and what that looks like is not being able to leave the house. Sometimes not being able to stand because I'm so overcome with emotion. Constantly, all day, every day, dealing with random, phone calls and decisions with therapists and school and counselors, and it was just so much. But then, one night, I'm watching YouTube, and my wife's out of town for some reason or another. I'm a boater, right? And for some reason or another, there's this adventure motorcycling video on YouTube of these guys riding in the backcountry of Colorado, and it sparked something in me. I didn't really know why or what at the time, but it did. And a month later, I kind of dove deep into that world and watched all the videos. A month later, bought a bike. I've never really been a motorcycle guy, and ultimately, it just led to this relationship with adventure. And as Drew began to heal, um, I really started to ride and noticed that it instilled in me a greater sense of capacity to take on the ongoing challenges for the road ahead. And my wife didn't love that I rode, but she loved the way that I came home. And so there was this relationship that started to reveal itself, and these values and this impact from adventure, in me, for my wife and son and myself, and all of our well-being. And so I spent 5 years unpacking, what's this? What is this deal with adventure, and why does it matter, and who should care? And ultimately, that's led to identifying these 5 powerful practices with 5 specific outcomes.
So this actually started with you watching, motorcycles in Colorado and then going out. Now, did you get a dirt bike or did you get a street bike?
These are like Dakar rally bikes. They're big street legal dirt bikes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that what you have?
Yeah, I had one, and then I upgraded, and I've had this one for I guess probably 4 years now, and it was my dream bike, and so now I have it, and yeah, I've taken 4 or 5 day solo trip down in Arkansas. I rebuilt my son's motorcycle that he bought for himself when he was 13. I rebuilt that for his high school graduation present, and took him on a 9 day trip out to Colorado with a group of other guys, and yeah, we got to live what I saw in that video years prior.
Oh my gosh, man, that's so amazing. So take us through these 5 steps here, 5 elements.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe we'll back it. Well, maybe we'll back it in. So we'll start with the number 5 first, and that's seeking excitement. There's a real the outcome of seeking excitement is energy. It energizes your life, and who couldn't use a little more fun and fun and joy in their life and happiness in their life? And it's important that if we're doing the other practices, we can count on it, right? Yeah, like a John Eldridge in Wild at Heart, right? Like expecting God's great reward. But it's also important to be intentional about going and seeking excitement, doing something fun, feeding your spirit with something that's fun and exciting, because it impacts your life, it energizes. So, particularly with so much going on coming at us today, we can quickly kind of get consumed by everything that we're kind of reacting to, and we
Yeah.
forget to take care of ourselves. So that's number 5.
What's so funny is you mentioned John Eldridge and you talk about seeking excitement. He says that young men or men in general, we need 3 things, right? We need a battle to fight, an adventure to be had, and a beauty to rescue. I got to be honest, and I told John this when I interviewed him. I was like, the beauty to rescue thing doesn't sit too well with me because it I feel like I'm going out and I'm seeking a codependent relationship. And he kind of like laughed about that. He's like, yeah, I've heard that a time or two. He's like, it's really just a woman to love in your life. And but that's so true. When you think about just men in general, especially if you ever like, man, I need something right now.
Yeah.
And I even see this in my own boys, like when we just got done with wrestling season, and my 15-year-old, who well, all both my older boys are dialed in like that, but they're like, now, well, now what do we do? Right. And then because they had a battle to fight, the adventure to be had, we do that quite a bit ourselves. And then they're both like dating girls. But the adventure to be had, or I'm sorry, the battle to fight was, well, my son was like, well, I'm football season's in like, 7 months. I'm gonna start bulking. I'm gonna go to the gym every day. And so like his battle right now is in the gym, and then my oldest son is like, well, I'm gonna run track. So it's like you see them seeking this excitement, like these adventures, these battles, right? And it's so important for, I think, men. If you look at I think one of the things that most men really deal with is exactly what you dealt with. It's almost like I need something in my life to bring me some sort of peace, or I need to maybe even somewhat remove myself from this situation just temporarily so I can come back better because of it. And for you, it sounds like the motorcycle was seeking that excitement, maybe even that, the adventure aspect of it, where you can think more clearly, where you have that time to decompress and you come back refreshed, as you said, your wife and son even noticed in you.
Yeah, 100%. Anytime I got on the bike, it was just there's also kind of this boyish sense of adventure inside. How dare I say, all men?
Oh yeah.
This
Yeah.
boyish sense of adventure in you, and you got to kind of feed the beast, if you will. And there's an element of risk in there and excitement. And every time I rode, I'd go and explore. I've dropped the bike in the middle of nowhere by myself, and this is a 500+ pound bike. I've broken down in the middle of the country with no cell coverage and the sun setting. And I had to, I was called to task. I had to figure it out. And every single time, and this speaks to another one of the practices, but definitely every single time I came home, I was coming home feeling refreshed and ready to do, I just had more capacity and kind of more open to come what may. All right, babe, I'm available. Whatever you want, let's go do. I just had more capacity in me. So, and I got to go play and have some fun.
That's
So,
cool, man.
yeah.
All right. Well, now you got us all worked up, man. What's number 4? We're working backwards.
Yeah, working backwards, and there's a reason for it. But exploring the unknown, that's number 4. And the outcome of exploring the unknown is insight. And so anytime we explore the unknown, both inside of ourselves and outside of ourselves, we're really just practicing curiosity. We don't know everything. We know what we know. We know what we don't know, and we don't know what we don't know. And I think that when we are open to and we're practicing being curious, we give ourselves and others a little space, right? And in that space, as Christians anyway, I've noticed in my life that, and I am tracking in this path that into the spiritual and life vision I have for myself, and I notice God showing up and dripping every single day. I can count on it, insight. And these insights aren't not just random insights that I don't really know what to do with them. These insights are insights into what I'm working on right now. You can count on it, and it's a beautiful relationship that you kind of get in with your life, with higher power, with God, when you are open and curious, and you allow yourself to not squeeze down so tight or get so busy that you don't have any room to notice life happen around you and for you.
I've noticed that as well. I have some of my best moments and best aha moments when I'm traveling. And I think it's because I'm on a plane, I'm removed from the grind, I'm removed from distractions of like all the to-dos and the things and all that. You just have moments to think. And I just had Chris Voss on the podcast not too terribly long ago, but we launched a really quick 90-second clip where he talked about uh, curiosity is the opposite of anger. When you're angry, you can't think. But when you're curious, you're open and you can think actually even a bit clearer, right? It's impossible to be angry or stressed and be curious at the same time. So curiosity is a perfect, quote unquote medication to feeling maybe overwhelmed or angry, right?
For
So
sure.
very
Yeah.
cool. Quick side note here. So my 15 exploring the unknown, my 15-year-old and I've been doing one-on-one trips with my boys for a long time. And my 15-year-old just got his hunting license through school. He took a class called Outdoor Pursuits. So he got his boating license, yeah, and his hunting license. I've never hunted. I mean, I didn't grow up, didn't have anybody teaching me how to hunt. I've never learned how to hunt, but I've always been curious about it. And my son is like, Dad, you should take me hunting. And I was like, dude, your old man does not know how to hunt. I was like, but you know what? I was like, let's go. And I've always had this mentality of like, I'm not going to be able to teach everything, but I will learn with you. Like, let's go figure it out. So I actually got on a call with this ranch in Texas. And basically it's for people like me who are just idiots when it comes to hunting. You've never done it. They're like, dude, just come down. Like, we'll guide you through it. Stay here for 2 days. We'll literally, you just show up and we guide you through everything else. So we're going, I think, pheasant and quail hunting down there. And it's just gonna be me and him and this guide. And I'm so excited about it. He's like, you nervous about it? I'm like, a little bit. I was like, I've never done this before. I mean, I've shot firearms countless times, but like I've never hunted. So I don't know what I don't know, but I'm really excited just to learn with you and experience it with you. And I think I think a lot of men, I think your message around staying curious and always being open to learn, we feel so much pressure to be the guy being like, well, if I'm not the one teaching them, they're probably not going to learn it either because I don't want to let them in on the fact that, or be an idiot, and not know what I'm doing. But I think you can learn together. Yeah.
Absolutely, and we'll speak into that a little bit with the first practice. So we're definitely speaking directly in line with all of this. I love the
Cool.
conversation. That's going to
Okay.
be, I think, a fun and powerful experience for you both. That's really great.
So what's number three?
Number three is getting uncomfortable. And it's more than just taking on a challenge. Um, the value of getting uncomfortable is trust. When we practice getting uncomfortable, we establish a deeper level of trust in ourselves and then by default also in others. And we also just cultivate our greater sense of confidence. And so anytime for me, this started as simply as taking cold showers. I was doing this, you probably heard of it, 75 hard.
Yeah.
And, I'm doing 75 hard, and I chose to start at the end of January a couple of years ago. That was brilliant. But so me and Cole got well acquainted, Old Man Winter and I. And but that's the practice, and that's the outcome. And you just can't when you're constantly doing it, practicing getting uncomfortable. The idea is to align that with a goal you have, with a pursuit, with a vision, and then practice getting uncomfortable in various ways that are in alignment with that. And it really helps you overcome and embrace the challenges because you kind of get this bring it on attitude because it snowballs. You're just growing as you continue to win and overcome challenges, and again establish deeper level of trust, knowing that you'll be okay and you can figure it out. And so it's a beautiful exercise, and you have control. You can personalize it, so it's not something that gets old or you just get tired of. You get to continue making up how you go about doing that.
I love that, man. Why do you think most people steer away from like that discomfort? Because we've done several trips with the kids where, on the surface, like it seemed really cool, right? Like I took in 2020 because of COVID and everything, we took our boys, and I had a friend of mine who lived, he had feet on the ground where we were at in Colorado, but we stayed at Twin Lakes and we were like literally dispersed camping, out in the middle of nowhere. So God only knows what's going to happen in Colorado. And people were like, why don't you just get an Airbnb? Like, and then actually one of my boys at the time, he got altitude sickness. And
Mm.
the friend of mine who lives in Colorado, he's a paramedic firefighter. So anytime we do anything camping in the mountains, because we've done several things in the mountains, I always have him come with us, and he brings his kid. But he also, like, if we get in any situation, he knows how to get us out of it. My little guy was like, he got dehydrated, and he got to the point where there was a point of no return. And my buddy was like, I got an IV. He's like, if he lets me pop in an IV, he's like, we're good. Otherwise, we're gonna have to go back home. And I was like, well, let's see what he says, and put the IV in. Even my mother-in-law was like, what are you thinking? And I was like, come on. I was like, kids, they'll never forget like the time that we spent camping in the mountains and seeing the things that we did and cooking outside and freezing our rear ends off, in the tent. We were all bundled up. But the fishing that we did, the hikes that we did, the beauty that we saw, and all this other stuff. To some people, they're like, well, why would you want to do that? Wouldn't you want to go on a beach and do nothing? I'm like, sometimes, but definitely not all the time. Right.
Yeah, I think that to answer that question, I think that the people are just not aware of the distinction between their thoughts and their brain's thoughts. And your brain has one job, and that's throughout the millennia. Your brain's job is to keep you alive,
Yeah.
safe. But there's a difference between your brain's thoughts and your thoughts, and that's a key thing to be aware of. To know when, oh, that's just my brain. That's not my thought, and that's why creating a clear spiritual life vision it really is critically important, so that you know what to say yes to and what to say no to, and what are challenges that you're just kind of fearful, but you can overcome that versus something that you really do need to pay attention to, like something with like safety in your gut instinct. There's a difference.
What's so cool is what you just shared was the value of trust, right? Exactly what you just said. And I love how you have each one of these five steps or five elements. They all have a value that's associated with them, of how it shows up in your life and what you learn from it, and the values that are created because of that. That's really cool. All right, so man, you got us all just super curious. What is number two?
Number two is gratitude. Right, critically important, and the outcome of the practice of gratitude is is positivity. And again, we get so busy today. Sometimes we lose sight, and a lot of men, a lot of people, we have this kind of hypercritical, hyper comparative kind of social narrative going on, and it can be easy to just get so busy that we forget to just anchor in our gratitude, to just connect with all that we're grateful for. Look, I don't have to think about seeing you on the camera. I can hear you. I don't have to think about making my ears hear. They just hear. My heart beat, it just beats. I have shelter. I have clothes. I have shoes. That's not anything that oftentimes I think that I think we can take it for granted, and it's really important to just stay connected to that positivity, the positives in our life, so that we don't take it for granted. And while we can have healthy ambition, let's not lose sight of just the simple gifts that we get every day.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Go with that. So I'm gonna lob out a question to you, and
Okay.
I'm gonna give you a moment to think about it, because yesterday, as you and I are recording, even though this podcast is launching in March, the Super Bowl was on last night, and me and my oldest son, we're so fascinated by the commercials, man. We just love them, and me as a business owner, like I analyze like the psychology behind them, and so like for instance, one of the commercials was Bradley Cooper and his mom for, I think it was T-Mobile, and it was nothing but bloopers. And my wife was like, "Why do you think they did that?" I was like, "Because everyone stops any conversation and what they're doing to watch a blooper because it's funny." And
Yeah.
here we are the next day. We remember who they were and what company it was, right? They got real estate in our brains. But here's the question I have for you: share a time with us where you really leveraged gratitude in a situation or a moment, and it might be as a dad or husband, maybe things you were going through with your son, where you really leaned into that gratitude and what it did for you. So while you think about that, I want to share a commercial that I thought was so genius. um I can't remember the guy's last name. Miles, I know, is his first name. He played Rooster in Maverick, but there's one commercial last night where his wife, and I think it was his real wife actually, where she's on hold with somebody, and she literally she's laying down the couch. She has the phone on top of her head, and it says, "Your hold time is 26 minutes." And it goes to then music like like this kind of like upbeat sort of music. And then Miles, again, I can't remember his last name, Rooster, I'll call him because that's, I loved his part in Maverick, goes to the fridge, grabs two Bud Lights, cracks them open. He hands one to his wife. He has the other one, and he picks her up, and they start dancing
Yeah.
in the family room, and he's like twirling her, and they're like just being totally goofy, and they're like, it's hysterical. So you take a situation where you like literally want to stick hot forks in your eyeballs, right? Like being on hold, and you turn it into like, how can we make this an experience that might be unforgettable, might connect us? How can we turn this into a gratitude moment? And I thought that that was brilliant. I even asked my son, I was like, dude, what did you get out of that commercial? And he even got it. He was like, I think I understood that I could probably take anything that annoys me, and if I be goofy about it or do something goofy with it, maybe that's unexpected, I could tolerate it more. And I was like, yeah, man, exactly. You got it. So how about you?
Love it. Two things come to mind. A singular moment that I had that was when we dropped Drew off at a residential therapeutic boarding school, um, and there were no tears. I was immensely grateful to just for the hope and the support. Right, so we just drove home, my wife and I, from there, and it was outside Kansas City, about 3.5 hours away. And I was just so grateful. And I did not have some sort of huge emotional, but I was handing my son over, and I know that after the humor of the the commercial you're referencing, that's a whoa, that was a little heavy, but that's what I was just super grateful for. It's just that support finally, years in, and just feeling so alone. So just hugely grateful for that, but also um, contrast. You spoke to it, and what I heard were anytime we have an experience that's different than the one that we really want, I refer to as contrast. I look at that as an opportunity to train. I used to make up a story about being in traffic. And the story that I made up was that I must be stupid if I've allowed myself to be in this stupid situation called traffic, because it's a miserable experience. I'm not a victim. I know traffic when traffic is bad and not bad. I must be stupid. And that's a terrible thing to be telling myself. But now what I did is started to use any kind of contrasting experience like traffic or something else as a training opportunity to practice patience and just be grateful for the fact that, well, I have this car to drive. Right. I get to be mobile. All right. So I got to hang on a little bit. So I really just got to really well in gratitude with traffic. So all contrast is an opportunity to train, if you ask me.
Hmm. Something just kind of came to mind. Like, yeah, yeah, you could literally use anytime I'm in traffic, it gives me the opportunity to reflect on what I'm most grateful for.
Sure, because it's not the traffic.
Yeah. Right. It's definitely not the traffic. Um, awesome, man. All right. So what is number one?
Number one is, you know, all of this is about, personal and professional development, right? You know, I am on a mission is to be and am and practice being a change and challenge specialist to really help people overcome anxiety and overwhelm, right? So that they can live a happy and more fulfilling life. None of this works unless we are open to the practice of allowing. And I prior to this, I had never heard of that. There's no teaching about allowing, but I remember being in a high level coaching. The outcome for allowing is change. Allowing is the catalyst for all change. If we're not allowing, we're resisting. And so I think it's important to ask ourselves, what are we allowing and what are we resisting? Right? Unless we are allowing ourselves to believe in a new possibility that we don't yet know, unless we're practicing allowing ourselves to give grace and receive grace, or to right to forgive maybe a girlfriend or a spouse cheated on you, had an affair, and now you're divorced and a single father. Maybe a millions of different experiences that have taken place, and we tend to carry around this baggage, and we can be right all day long, but until we allow ourselves to just get complete with the past and believe in a new possibility, no change is ever going to happen. Right. So we have to practice allowing, and it can be ongoing for sure. But that's number one. And that alone, when you allow yourself to receive grace and believe in a new possibility, man, things get really exciting really quick, if you ask me.
That is really cool, man. I'd really like to know, what do you do with this work?
So I started, it's been an interesting evolutionary process again. I have spoken at a residential therapeutic boarding school. I've spoken at Catholic men's retreats, and I'm not Catholic. I'm not from St. Louis, and the topic I was speaking on was community, but I rolled this into that. To a geo convention in Canada, to a bunch of geoscientists. When you talk about change and challenge, and so I'm wrapping up and finalizing a contract with a Fortune 500 company here in St. Louis that I'll reveal soon. But it's I'm just honored that they've asked me to come in and teach these practices to a lot of employees are also parents who are struggling with their own challenges at home and at work, and a lot are taking care of their kids and their own parents. And so a lot of people really wrestle with overwhelm and anxiety and just change and challenge. And so that's what I do, is teach these practices to give people tools that they can use and deploy in their life, starting right where they are, and they can personalize them and put them to work right away. So that's what I do.
Such a beautiful lesson, man, for fathers and husbands out there. Because we say this a lot, but men throw themselves, I think, on the sacrificial sword of burning ourselves out, overwhelming ourselves for the quote unquote sake of everybody else. And what actually ends up happening, and we usually just don't see it, is we're actually doing the opposite. We're showing up as our burnt out, overwhelmed selves, thinking that it's just our presence that's needed. but it's actually our best presence that is needed, right? And you wrap that up beautifully, man. Well, as we wrap up here, I just want to give you an opportunity for, if the men want to connect with you further, what is the best way to do so?
The best way is really just on LinkedIn, and we can go from there. But Andy Way, always adventure on LinkedIn. Shoot me a direct message, and happy to answer any questions. See if we're a good fit. I'm a speaker and a coach, and so yeah, love to hear from you.
Outstanding. Well, guys, not to worry. We're going to have Andy's LinkedIn in the show notes for you. Also, our show sponsor today, which is Bark. As Andy was saying, when it comes to our kids and protecting them, we need all the breadcrumbs that we need. And, Bark is a perfect app to install on your kids' phones so we can get those breadcrumbs, so whether it's our kids are being bullied or they're being tempted by drugs or alcohol or anything else, it's these types of resources that luckily we have today, right? Technology can be our worst enemy, but it can also be something that can be a friend of us as well. So Andy, thank you so much for coming on today. I such an honor hearing from you, and thanks for helping our men in the audience.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Larry.
You bet. Gentlemen, head on over to thedadedge.com/Friday 9-3 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/Friday 9-3 for this show. Specifically, if you want to look at Bark, head on over to thedadedge.com/Bark, BARK. Gentlemen, go out, live legendary. Take care.